The auditorium of Ireland's Got Talent was alive with music, lighting, and chatter as people waited for the next audition, but no one could have imagined that the moment that would define the entire night would come from someone who never planned to stand on that stage. Sitting quietly in the audience was Mark Fox, a 19-year-old from Tondo, Manila, with eyes that carried stories of hunger, resilience, and survival. His clothes were simple, slightly faded, the kind worn by someone who has known the price of every coin earned. He had flown to Ireland after working in construction and cleaning jobs just to visit his aunt, and by chance found himself here, sitting among hundreds, watching dreams unfold on stage. Mark wasn't there to audition. He didn't have the confidence, the wardrobe, or even the money to register. He was simply grateful to see the show live. But as performer after performer took the stage, something deep inside his chest stirred, a pressure that felt like his heart asking to speak. When the host walked through the audience, joking and engaging with the crowd, asking if anyone had a small talent to share, Mark felt his hand rise before he even understood what he was doing. There was a murmur, a soft ripple of curiosity, and the host's attention turned toward him. "You want to try? Here? Now?" he asked, half surprised. Mark's voice trembled softly as he answered, "Yes, if it's okay." The judges exchanged uncertain glances, but Simon leaned forward, intrigued. Soon security gently guided Mark to the stage, and as he stepped into the spotlight, for the first time in his life, he was seen. The judges asked him why he didn't audition officially. Mark swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. "I didn't have the clothes or the fee. I just wanted to watch. I never thought I could be up here." The room grew still. Something about him, his sincerity, his humility, changed the energy instantly. When the music began, Mark closed his eyes and began to sing, his voice soft at first, carrying the warmth of home, the ache of poverty, the quiet love of a Filipino mother working herself to exhaustion. The melody rose like a river that had been held back too long, flowing with honesty, vulnerability, and pain. Every note revealed a memory, singing on crowded Manila streets, sharing leftover rice, dreaming of more than survival. The audience didn't breathe, they felt. His voice was not polished but true, and that truth held the entire theater in silence. When his final note faded, the room remained frozen, not from confusion, but from awe. Slowly, the silence broke into gasps, then tears, then applause that felt like thunder. Mark didn't just sing. He opened his life. He let everyone feel his struggle. He transformed a random moment into something unforgettable. And in that moment, the world, the theater remained wrapped in emotion as the final echo of Mark's voice dissolved, leaving behind a silence so heavy that it felt almost sacred. Mark stood on the stage, his hands trembling at his sides, unsure whether he had done something beautiful or something foolish. His breathing was uneven, his heart pounding loud enough that he swore the audience could hear it. The judges sat speechless at first, frozen not because they didn't know what to say, but because they didn't want to disturb the fragile purity of the moment. Amanda blinked quickly, her eyes glassy with tears she didn't try to hide, as she leaned forward and spoke softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mark, what you just did was not just singing. It was storytelling. It was life." Alicia pressed her hand to her chest, visibly shaken, her throat struggling to let words form. "I could feel everything, your pain, your hope, your love for your family. You made us understand your world without even explaining it. The crowd murmured in agreement, people wiping tears, some holding their breath to stop themselves from crying harder. Then all eyes turned to Simon, who had been staring at Mark with an expression no one expected, something between awe, sadness, and respect. Simon slowly stood up, and the entire arena reacted with a collective gasp. He walked closer to the edge of the judges' table, his voice lower and more serious than usual. "You said you didn't audition because you didn't think you belonged on this stage," Simon said, his tone heavy with meaning. "But I want to tell you something very clearly. This stage belongs to you as much as anyone. You don't need fancy clothes or money to have worth. What you did today reminded everyone in this room why music matters." Mark's lips shook as tears filled his eyes again. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I sing on the streets in Tondo for coins to buy rice, just enough for my mother and sister. I didn't think someone like me could ever stand here." A soft sob broke from somewhere in the audience, followed by another and another, until it felt like the entire room was holding Mark's sorrow with him. And then, without waiting for votes, without hesitation, Simon turned and placed his hand on the golden buzzer. The audience gasped, some covering their mouths, others rising to their feet. Simon pressed down, and instantly the room exploded into gold, confetti pouring like rain from heaven, music swelling, people cheering, crying, clapping. Mark's knees gave out, and he fell forward, overwhelmed, clutching his face as tears streamed uncontrollably. The judges stood, the crowd roared, and strangers shouted his name like they had known him forever. In that single moment, a poor boy from Tondo, who came only to watch, was no longer invisible. He had been seen. He had been heard. He had been chosen. The golden confetti continued to fall like a blessing that felt unreal, sparkling in the lights as Mark remained kneeling on the stage, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the moment, and it was as if time itself had slowed to let him understand that his life was no longer the same. Amanda hurried toward him first, bending down to pull him into a warm embrace, whispering, "You deserve this, you really do," her voice shaking just as much as his. Mark clung to her like someone clinging to hope itself, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to breathe through the emotions flooding him all at once. When he stood again, his eyes were red, his cheeks wet, but his smile was something the world had never seen from him before, something bright and full and unguarded. The audience still cheered loudly, but their applause wasn't loud in a chaotic way. It was the kind that came from hearts that had been touched deeply. Backstage, the crew and contestants watched the screens in disbelief, some wiping tears, others shaking their heads in amazement at how a simple moment had transformed into something historic. As Mark walked slowly off stage, hands still trembling, he kept whispering to himself, "Mama, Mama, I did it!" like a prayer being said over and over. The host placed an arm around his shoulders, guiding him gently as if protecting something precious, saying softly, "She's going to be so proud of you." Mark tried to speak, but his voice broke, and tears began again. "She works every day, every night. She thinks I only come here to watch," he said, choking on the words as though they were too heavy to carry. The judges came backstage to meet him personally, something that rarely happened. Alicia hugged him tightly, still crying. Amanda held his hand. And then Simon approached, slower, quieter than usual, no cameras forcing him to perform a persona, just a man seeing another human being who had fought life and still chose to dream. Simon rested a hand on Mark's shoulder and said softly, You are the kind of person who reminds us why we have this show. Talent, real talent, comes from pain, from heart, from spirit. You have all of that. Mark lowered his head and whispered, Thank you. Thank you for believing in me. I just wanted to help my mother. I just wanted a chance. Simon nodded gently, as if understanding every invisible scar on Mark's soul. Outside the arena, the crowd that had witnessed the performance talked about him with awe, telling strangers, calling family, sharing clips online before the show even aired, because some moments are too real to keep quiet. And as the night ended, Mark stood alone for a moment, looking up at the sky, breath unsteady but full, whispering, This is for you, Mama. Knowing that his journey had just begun, knowing that for the first time in his life, the world was finally looking back at him with love.